Hey there, friends. Before we dive into one of the most chilling stories from the American South, I need you to do me a huge favor. Hit that subscribe button right now, because what you're about to hear will shake you to your core. Share this video with someone who loves dark history, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love connecting with viewers from around the world. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single detail of this terrifying tale from 1856 Natchez. Now let me take you back to a time when evil wore the face of innocence. My name is Eli and I'm 13 years old. At least I think I am. Time moves differently when you're property, when your days are measured not by birthdays but by the weight of chains and the sting of the whip. I live in the attic of the Beaumont Mansion, the grandest house on the bluffs overlooking the Mississippi River in Natchez. From my small window, I can see the entire city sprawling below. The cotton warehouses, the slave markets, the grand mansions where men like Colonel Beaumont count their money, while people like me count their scars. The attic is my prison and my sanctuary. During the day, I'm invisible, moving through the house like a shadow, serving meals, cleaning boots, emptying chamber pots. But at night, when the Beaumonts sleep in their silk sheets, I press my ear to the floorboards and listen. Oh, how I listen. You'd be amazed what white folks say when they think no one's around to hear. Tonight, like every night for the past 3 years, I'm listening to Colonel Beaumont and his wife discuss their business. Mrs. Beaumont's voice is sharp, cutting through the darkness like broken glass. The new shipment from Charleston arrived today, she says. 12 strong backs, 2 breeding wenches, and a boy about Eli's age. My stomach turns. Another boy. Another soul to be broken on the wheel of their greed. Good, the colonel grunts. We'll need extra hands for the harvest. And if that boy's as quick as Eli, we might have ourselves another house servant. Quick, that's what they call intelligence when it comes from someone they own. I learned to read by watching the Beaumont children during their lessons, memorizing every letter, every word, storing knowledge like a squirrel stores nuts for winter. But I had to be careful. Too smart, and they'd sell me downriver. Not smart enough, and I'd end up in the fields, dead before my 20th birthday. The floorboards creak as Colonel Beaumont moves around his study. I know this sound well. He's pouring himself another glass of bourbon, the expensive kind that costs more than most slaves see in a lifetime. Speaking of Eli, he continues, he's been different lately, quieter than usual. My heart pounds against my ribs like a caged bird. Different, if only they knew how different I really was. He's growing up, Mrs. Beaumont replies dismissively. They all get sullen around that age. Just make sure he knows his place. His place. My place is supposed to be grateful. Grateful for the scraps from their table. Grateful for the rags on my back. Grateful for the privilege of serving the very people who bought and sold human beings like livestock. But gratitude died in me the day I watched them beat Sarah to death. Sarah was my friend, maybe the only real friend I'd ever had. She was 16 with skin like polished mahogany and eyes that still held hope despite everything. She worked in the kitchen, and sometimes, when no one was looking, she'd slip me an extra biscuit or a piece of candy, small kindnesses that felt like miracles in our world of cruelty. I was 7 when they killed her. 7 years old, hiding behind the kitchen door, watching as Colonel Beaumont's son, Master James, accused her of stealing a silver spoon. She hadn't stolen anything. I knew because I'd seen Master James drop it in the garden during one of his drunken stupors. But Sarah was just a slave, and her word meant nothing against his. They tied her to the whipping post in the courtyard. 20 lashes, they said. 20 lashes for a crime she didn't commit. But Master James was drunk, and his arm was strong, and by the 15th lash, Sarah wasn't moving anymore. By the 20th, she was gone. I watched it all. Every strike, every scream, every drop of blood that fell onto the white stones of the courtyard. And something inside me broke that day. Not broke like a bone breaks, broke like a dam breaks, releasing something dark and terrible that had been building behind my ribs for years. That night, as I lay in my attic prison, I made a promise to Sarah's memory. I would make them pay, all of them. Every single person who had stood by and watched, who had laughed, who had treated human beings like animals. I would be patient, I would be careful, but I would have my revenge. The voices below have stopped now. The colonel and his wife have gone to bed, probably to dream peaceful dreams, while I lie awake, planning their destruction. But I'm patient. I've been patient for 6 years now, Learning, watching, waiting for the perfect moment. Tomorrow the Beaumonts are hosting one of their famous dinner parties. All the important families will be there. The Washingtons, the Merricks, the Dunbars, the cream of Natchez society, gathered under one roof to celebrate their wealth built on the backs of human misery. They'll eat their fine food, drink their expensive wine, and toast to their continued prosperity, while their slaves serve them with downcast eyes and silent tongues. But this time will be different. This time, I'll be watching from the shadows, memorizing faces, learning secrets, preparing for the harvest to come. Because you see, friends, what they don't know, what they could never imagine, is that the quiet boy who serves their meals and cleans their boots has been planning their deaths for years. I roll over on my thin mattress and stare out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, Sarah's spirit is waiting for justice, and I'm going to give it to her, one aristocrat at a time. The moon is full tonight, casting silver light across the Mississippi. It's beautiful, in a way, peaceful. But peace is a luxury I can't afford. Not yet. Not until every last one of them pays for what they've done. My name is Eli, and tomorrow, the killing begins. The dining room of the Beaumont mansion gleams like a jewel tonight. Crystal chandeliers casting dancing shadows across mahogany walls, lined with portraits of dead ancestors. I move between the guests like a ghost, refilling wine glasses and clearing plates, invisible in the way that only slaves can be invisible, present but not acknowledged, seen but not noticed. 23 of Natchez's most powerful families have gathered tonight to celebrate the cotton harvest. The men wear their finest suits, gold watch chains glinting across their bellies, while their wives flutter in silk gowns that cost more than most people earn in a year. They laugh and joke and discuss business as if the people serving them aren't even human. I know every face at this table. I've memorized their names, their habits, their weaknesses. Colonel Beaumont sits at the head, his face flushed with bourbon and pride. To his right, Judge Morrison picks at his roasted duck while complaining about uppity slaves who dare to look him in the eye. Mrs. Dunbar, dripping in pearls, discusses the latest fashions from New Orleans, while her husband calculates profits from human misery. But it's Master James who draws my attention tonight. 22 years old, handsome in the way that money makes men handsome, he's regaling the table with stories of his recent trip to Charleston. His voice carries across the room as he describes the slave auction he attended, rating human beings like livestock. "You should have seen this buck they had on the block," he laughs, gesturing with his wine glass. "Strong as an ox, but stupid as one too. Perfect for field work. Went for $800. Highway robbery, if you ask me." The table erupts in laughter. These people find humor in the buying and selling of human souls. My hands shake as I pour wine into Mrs. Washington's glass, but I keep my face blank, my eyes downcast. Not yet, I tell myself. Not yet. "Speaking of auctions," Judge Morrison interjects, "I heard there was some trouble down in New Orleans last week. Slave uprising in one of the warehouses." The mood at the table shifts slightly. Slave uprisings are their greatest fear, the nightmare that haunts their dreams of easy wealth. "Nonsense," Colonel Beaumont waves dismissively. "Our slaves are happy, well-fed, well-treated. They know their place. Well-treated." I think of Sarah, of the scars on my back, of the children sold away from their mothers. Well-treated. "Still," Mrs. Merrick says, her voice dropping to a whisper, "one can never be too careful. I've heard stories of house slaves poisoning their masters. Terrible business. Poisoning. The word hangs in the air like smoke. If only they knew how close they are to the truth." As the evening progresses, the wine flows freely and tongues loosen. I learn that Judge Morrison has been skimming money from estate sales, that Mrs. Dunbar beats her slaves with a riding crop, that the Washington family recently sold a 10-year-old girl to pay gambling debts. Each revelation adds fuel to the fire burning in my chest, but it's what happens after dinner that seals their fate. The men retire to the study for cigars and brandy, while the women gather in the parlor. I'm ordered to serve in the study, where the real business of the evening begins. Maps are spread across Colonel Beaumont's desk, maps showing new territories, new opportunities for expansion. "The Kansas territory is opening up," Judge Morrison explains, pointing to the map with his cigar. "Prime cotton land, and the locals are friendly to our way of life." "How many slaves would we need for an operation that size?" asks Mr. Dunbar. 500, maybe 6, the colonel replies. We could ship them up from New Orleans, establish a proper plantation within 2 years. 500 souls, 500 people torn from their families, their homes, their lives to feed these men's greed. I grip the brandy decanter so tightly my knuckles turn white. What about the abolitionists? Mr. Washington asks nervously. I hear they're getting bolder. Master James laughs, the same laugh I heard 6 years ago when Sarah died. Let them come. We'll show them what happens to troublemakers. That's when I see her. Through the study window, I catch a glimpse of movement in the courtyard. It's Mercy, one of the kitchen slaves, barely 14 years old. She's carrying a basket of laundry, trying to finish her work before the masters notice she's behind schedule. But Master James has noticed. His eyes follow her movement and I see something predatory in his gaze. He excuses himself from the group and steps outside. My blood turns to ice. I know what's about to happen. I've seen that look before, heard the stories whispered in the slave quarters. Master James has appetites and he takes what he wants regardless of consent or consequence. The other men continue their discussion, oblivious to the horror about to unfold in their own courtyard. I set down the brandy and move to the window, my heart pounding like thunder. Master James corners Mercy by the well. She drops her basket, laundry scattering across the stones. I can't hear their words, but I can see her fear, the way she backs against the stone wall with nowhere to run. Please, Master James, her voice carries through the night air. I ain't done nothing wrong. Course you haven't, girl, he replies, his voice thick with wine and lust. Just be still now. That's when something inside me snaps, not breaks, snaps, like a whip cracks, sharp and violent and final. I watch as he grabs her, as she struggles, as he tears at her dress. And I know that this is the moment. This is when it begins. I slip out of the study while the men argue over territorial boundaries. The kitchen is empty. All the other slaves are either serving or hiding, as they always do when Master James gets that look in his eyes. I know exactly what I'm looking for. Mrs. Beaumont keeps her special spices in a locked cabinet, but I learned to pick locks years ago. Inside, behind the imported pepper and exotic salts, is a small vial of white powder. Arsenic, she calls it, for killing rats. How fitting. The brandy decanter is still warm when I return to the study. The men are too drunk and too absorbed in their plans to notice my absence. I pour carefully, precisely, adding just enough to each glass to ensure the desired effect. Not enough to kill immediately. That would be too obvious, too quick. Just enough to start the process. Ah, Eli, Colonel Beaumont says as I refill his glass. Good boy, you know just how I like it. Yes, sir. I know exactly how you like it. By the time I return to the window, it's over. Mercy sits by the well, her dress torn, her face streaked with tears. Master James straightens his clothes and walks back toward the house, whistling as if nothing happened. But something did happen, something that will echo through this house, through this city, through history itself. Because tonight, as these men toast their continued prosperity with poisoned brandy, they've sealed their own fate. I watch them drink. I watch them laugh. I watch them plan the destruction of more lives while their own destruction burns in their bellies like liquid fire. The first phase has begun. Sarah's spirit can rest a little easier tonight, knowing that justice is finally coming to Natchez. My name is Eli, and I've just served my first course of revenge. 3 days have passed since the dinner party, and the Beaumont mansion feels different. There's a tension in the air like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. The servants whisper in corners, their voices hushed and fearful. Something is wrong, though they don't yet know what. I know what's wrong. I've been watching, waiting, counting the hours since I served that poisoned brandy. Arsenic is a patient killer. It works slowly, methodically, mimicking the symptoms of common illnesses: stomach pains, nausea, weakness. The victims think they're simply unwell, never suspecting that death is already coursing through their veins. This morning I'm polishing silver in the dining room when the news arrives. Dr. Whitmore, the family physician, rides up the circular drive with his black bag and grim expression. Through the window, I watch Colonel Beaumont greet him on the front steps, their conversation urgent and hushed. "It's Judge Morrison," I hear the colonel say as they enter the house. "Took ill yesterday evening. His wife says he's been vomiting blood." My heart races, but I keep my face neutral, my hands steady as I work. The first domino has fallen. Dr. Whitmore removes his hat, his weathered face grave. I'm afraid it's worse than that, Colonel. Judge Morrison passed away an hour ago. His wife found him in his study this morning. The silver candlestick slips from my hands, clattering to the floor. Both men turn to look at me, and I quickly bow my head in what I hope appears to be shock and grief. Sorry, Master, I mumble, retrieving the candlestick. Judge Morrison was always kind to us servants. Kind. The man who sentenced runaway slaves to death, who separated families without a second thought, who laughed at stories of human suffering. But they expect grief from their property, so I give them what they expect. Colonel Beaumont waves dismissively. Clean that properly, boy. Dr. Whitmore, what could have caused such a sudden illness? Hard to say without a proper examination, the doctor replies, but I can hear uncertainty in his voice. Could be his heart, could be something he ate. These things happen, especially to men of his appetites. They retire to the study to discuss the details, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts. Judge Morrison is dead. The first name on my list has been crossed off, and no one suspects a thing. But this is just the beginning. Over the next 2 days, more news arrives. Mr. Dunbar has taken ill with similar symptoms: violent stomach pains, fever, blood in his vomit. Mrs. Washington found her husband collapsed in their garden, barely conscious and burning with fever. The symptoms are spreading through Natchez's elite like wildfire, and panic is beginning to set in. I continue my duties as if nothing has changed, but inside, I'm calculating. The arsenic I used was carefully measured, enough to kill but slowly enough to avoid immediate suspicion. Some will die quickly, others will linger for days or weeks. The uncertainty will drive them mad with fear. It's on the 4th day that everything changes. I'm serving breakfast when Master James stumbles into the dining room, his face pale and drawn. He's been complaining of stomach pains since yesterday, but this morning he looks truly ill. Sweat beads on his forehead despite the cool morning air, and his hands shake as he reaches for his coffee cup. "James, you look terrible," Mrs. Beaumont says, her voice sharp with concern. "Perhaps you should see Dr. Whitmore." "I'm fine, Mother," he snaps, but his voice lacks its usual arrogance. "Just tired." But he's not fine. As I watch him struggle to eat his breakfast, I feel a dark satisfaction spreading through my chest. This is the man who killed Sarah, who violated mercy, who treats human beings like playthings for his amusement. Now he's getting a taste of his own medicine, literally. The morning passes slowly. Master James retires to his room, claiming he needs rest. Mrs. Beaumont paces the house like a caged animal, sending servants to check on him every hour. Colonel Beaumont has locked himself in his study with Dr. Whitmore, trying to understand what's happening to their social circle. It's just after noon when the screaming starts. I'm in the kitchen when I hear it, a sound of pure agony echoing from the 2nd floor. Mrs. Beaumont's voice follows, high and panicked. "James! Oh God, James!" I drop the dishes I'm washing and run toward the stairs, along with every other servant in the house. We cluster at the bottom of the grand staircase, looking up at the chaos unfolding above. Dr. Whitmore emerges from Master James's room, his face ashen. "Get me hot water and clean towels," he barks at the servants, "and send someone for the priest." The priest. That can only mean one thing. Mrs. Beaumont appears in the doorway, her usually perfect hair disheveled, her dress stained with what looks like blood. "He's dying," she whispers, her voice breaking. "My boy is dying, and I don't know why." I know why. I know exactly why, and the knowledge fills me with a terrible joy. Justice is being served, one poisoned glass at a time. The next few hours pass in a blur of activity. Servants run back and forth with supplies for the doctor, while Mrs. Beaumont keeps vigil by her son's bedside. Colonel Beaumont sends riders to fetch specialists from New Orleans, but I know it's too late. The arsenic has done its work. As evening falls, the house grows quiet. The servants huddle in the kitchen, whispering prayers and speculation. They're afraid of whatever sickness is claiming their masters, afraid of what will happen to them if the Beaumont family dies out. But I'm not afraid. I'm exhilarated. I slip upstairs while the family is distracted, moving like a shadow through the familiar hallways. Master James's room is at the end of the corridor, and I can hear voices inside, Mrs. Beaumont sobbing, Dr. Whitmore murmuring medical terms, Colonel Beaumont demanding answers that don't exist. I press my ear to the door and listen. The convulsions are getting worse, Dr. Whitmore says. I've given him laudanum for the pain, but there's nothing more I can do. There has to be something, Colonel Beaumont growls. He's my only son. I'm sorry, Colonel. Whatever this is, it's beyond my skill to treat. A long silence, broken only by Mrs. Beaumont's quiet weeping. Then Master James speaks, his voice weak and raspy. The slave boy. Where's the slave boy? My blood turns to ice. Does he suspect? Has he figured it out somehow? Which slave boy? Mrs. Beaumont asks. Eli, I want to see Eli. Footsteps approach the door, and I quickly retreat to the shadows. Colonel Beaumont emerges and calls down the hallway. Eli, get up here, boy. I have no choice but to obey. I walk slowly down the corridor, my heart pounding, trying to prepare for whatever comes next. The room smells of sickness and death, of medicines and fear. Master James lies in his four-poster bed, his skin yellow and waxy, his eyes sunken deep in their sockets. Come closer, boy, he whispers. I approach the bed, keeping my expression neutral. Up close, I can see the full extent of the poison's work. His lips are cracked and bleeding, his breathing shallow and labored. He's dying and he knows it. I want you to know, he says, his voice barely audible, that I'm sorry. Sorry. The word hangs in the air like smoke. Sorry for Sarah. Sorry for Mercy. Sorry for the countless others he's hurt and humiliated and destroyed. Sorry for what, Master James? I ask, my voice carefully neutral. For everything. The way I... He coughs, blood speckling his lips. It wasn't right. None of it was right. Deathbed confessions. How convenient. How utterly meaningless. You're forgiven, Master James, I lie, because that's what they expect to hear. You just rest now. He nods weakly and closes his eyes. Within the hour, he's dead. The house erupts in grief and chaos. Mrs. Beaumont collapses, overcome with sorrow. Colonel Beaumont rages at Dr. Whitmore, demanding explanations that don't exist. Servants weep and wail, some from genuine emotion, others from fear of what comes next. But I feel nothing but satisfaction. The first blood has been spilled, and it tastes sweeter than I ever imagined. As I help prepare Master James's body for burial, I whisper a promise to his corpse. This is just the beginning. Before I'm done, every family that profited from our misery will know the taste of their own blood. My name is Eli, and tonight, Sarah's killer lies cold in his grave. The harvest has begun. The funeral of Master James Beaumont draws half of Natchez to the cemetery on the bluffs. Black carriages line the road like a procession of crows, their occupants dressed in mourning clothes that cost more than most slaves see in a lifetime. I stand with the other house servants at the back of the crowd, my head bowed in false grief while my heart sings with triumph. But my celebration is short-lived. As dirt falls on Master James's coffin, I realize that my work has only just begun. The arsenic was effective, but limited. I used nearly all of Mrs. Beaumont's supply, and the remaining families will be on guard now. Fear has made them cautious, suspicious. I need a new approach, new methods, new allies. That's when I remember the stories whispered in the slave quarters, stories of old Mama Brigitte, the root woman who lives deep in the cypress swamp south of town. They say she knows secrets older than slavery itself, that she can brew potions to heal or harm, that she speaks with spirits of the dead. Most dismiss her as superstition, but I've learned that superstition often hides truth. 3 nights after the funeral, when the moon is dark and the house sleeps, I slip out through the kitchen door and make my way toward the swamps. The night air is thick with humidity and the sound of insects, but I'm not afraid. Fear is a luxury I abandoned long ago. The path to Mama Brigitte's cabin is treacherous, winding through marshland, where one wrong step could mean drowning in black water. Spanish moss hangs from the cypress trees like funeral shrouds, and somewhere in the darkness, an alligator bellows its ancient song. But I press on, guided by instinct and desperation. I smell the cabin before I see it, wood smoke mixed with herbs and something else, something wild and primal that makes my skin crawl. The structure emerges from the mist like something from a nightmare, built on stilts above the swamp water, its walls covered in strange symbols carved deep into the wood. I've been expecting you, child. The voice comes from the shadows of the porch and I nearly jump out of my skin. An ancient woman sits in a rocking chair, so still I mistook her for part of the darkness. Her skin is the color of rich earth, lined with wrinkles that speak of decades spent in this wild place. Her eyes are milky white with cataracts, but somehow I feel like she can see straight through to my soul. "Mama Brigitte?" I ask, my voice barely a whisper. "That's what they call me," she replies, her voice like rustling leaves. "But you can call me Mama. Come up here, boy, let me look at you proper." I climb the rickety steps to her porch, my heart pounding. Up close, she's even more intimidating. Tall and gaunt, with gnarled hands that move like spider legs as she gestures for me to sit. "You the one been poisoning them white folks," she says matter-of-factly. "Don't look so surprised, child. The spirits tell me things. They've been talking about you plenty lately." My mouth goes dry. If she knows, who else might know? "I don't know what you mean, Mama." She cackles, a sound like breaking branches. "Course you do. That Morrison man, he came to me in a dream, screaming about burning in his belly. And that Beaumont boy, Lord, he was mad as a wet cat, cursing your name from the other side." The other side. She speaks of the dead as if they're neighbors who might drop by for tea. Despite my fear, I find myself leaning forward, fascinated. "They deserved what they got," I say quietly. "Oh, I ain't judging you, child," Mama Brigitte replies. "Lord knows they had it coming. But you doing this all wrong, using that white woman's poison like some amateur. You want real power, you got to understand the old ways." She stands and shuffles into her cabin, motioning for me to follow. The interior is a maze of hanging herbs, animal bones and glass jars filled with things I don't want to identify. Candles flicker in every corner, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The air is thick with smoke and the smell of decay. "Sit," she commands, pointing to a wooden stool. "Let me tell you about justice, real justice." I sit, mesmerized, as she begins to move around the cabin with surprising grace for someone so old. She pulls jars from shelves, measures powders, mutters words in a language I don't recognize. "You think you the first slave to want revenge?" she asks. "Child, I've been helping folks like you for 60 years. Your mama, she came to me once when you was just a baby." My heart stops. "You knew my mother?" "Course I did. Beautiful girl, smart as a whip, just like you. She wanted protection for her boy, wanted to make sure you'd survive what was coming." Mama Brigitte pauses in her work, her blind eyes somehow finding mine. "She died protecting you, you know. Took a beating meant for you when you was too young to remember." Tears sting my eyes. I have no memories of my mother. She died when I was 3, and the Beaumonts never spoke of her. But knowing she died for me, that she loved me enough to sacrifice herself, it adds fuel to the fire burning in my chest. "She made me promise to help you when the time came," Mama Brigitte continues. "Said you'd have a special purpose, a special gift for bringing justice to the wicked." She returns to her work, grinding something in a stone mortar. The sound is rhythmic, hypnotic, like a heartbeat. "What I'm making for you ain't like that white woman's poison," she explains. "This here's got power in it, real power. It don't just kill the body, it torments the soul." She holds up a small cloth bag, no bigger than my thumb. "Graveyard dirt from a murdered slave, mixed with oleander petals and the blood of a black rooster killed at midnight. One pinch of this in their food or drink, and they'll die slow and hard, seeing visions of everyone they ever wronged." I take the bag with trembling hands. It's warm to the touch, and I swear I can feel something moving inside it, something alive and angry. "But that ain't all," Mama Brigitte says. "You want to really hurt them, you got to understand their fears. These white folks, they terrified of slave uprisings, of losing control. You make them think their own slaves turning against them, and they'll tear each other apart." She reaches into a cabinet and pulls out another bag, this one larger and filled with what looks like ordinary herbs. "This here's for the slaves. Mix it in their food and it'll make them bold, make them remember they're human. Won't hurt them none, but it'll change how they act, how they carry themselves." The implications hit me like a thunderbolt. I don't just have to kill the masters, I can turn their own world against them, make them paranoid and suspicious of everyone around them. "Why are you helping me?" I ask. Mama Brigitte settles back into her chair, her ancient face thoughtful. "Because I seen what's coming, child. The spirits show me things. A great war, brother fighting brother. The whole South burning like a funeral pyre. Your work, it's just the beginning. You stirring up something that been sleeping too long." She reaches out and touches my face with one gnarled finger. Her skin is cold as riverstone. But you got to be smart about it. Can't just go around poisoning folks willy-nilly. You got to make it look natural, make them think it's God's judgment or bad luck or anything except what it really is. We spend the next hour planning. Mama Brigitte knows every family in Natchez, every secret, every weakness. She tells me about Judge Morrison's widow, who's been stealing from the church collection plate, about the Dunbar family's gambling debts and their desperate need for money, about the Washington plantation, where the overseer has been selling slaves on the side and pocketing the profits. Information is power, she says. You use what you know about them, and they'll destroy themselves. All you got to do is give them a little push. As dawn approaches, I prepare to leave. Mama Brigitte walks me to the edge of her porch, moving with the careful steps of someone who knows every board by heart. One more thing, child, she says. The spirits, they got a message for you. They say your mama's proud, but she's worried too. This path you walking, it don't end well for most folks who take it. I don't care about endings, I reply. I care about justice. Justice and revenge, they ain't the same thing, she warns. But I reckon you'll learn that for yourself soon enough. I make my way back through the swamp as the sun rises, the 2 bags of powder hidden in my shirt. Behind me, Mama Brigitte's cabin disappears into the mist, like something from a dream. But the weight of her gifts is real, and so is the knowledge she's given me. The masters of Natchez think they're safe now, think the worst is over. They're wrong. I have new weapons now, new allies, new understanding of the power that flows through this dark land. My name is Eli, and I've just learned to speak with the voices of the dead. The real war is about to begin. 2 weeks have passed since my visit to Mama Brigitte, and Natchez has become a city of whispers and shadows. The mysterious deaths continue to spread through the aristocracy like a plague, but now there's something else, something that has the masters more frightened than any disease. Their slaves are changing. It started small, almost imperceptible. A house servant looking a master directly in the eye instead of keeping their gaze downcast. A field hand walking with their shoulders straight instead of hunched in submission. Kitchen workers humming spirituals with voices that carry defiance instead of resignation. I've been careful with Mama Brigitte's second gift, the herbs that awaken courage in enslaved hearts. Just a pinch mixed into the communal meals, just enough to remind my people that they are human beings, not property. The change is subtle but profound, like watching flowers bloom after a long winter. But it's the other gift, the death powder, that's doing the real work. Mrs. Dunbar was the second to fall. I slipped the powder into her morning tea while serving breakfast, watching as she complained about the uppity behavior of her house slaves. Within 3 days she was dead, found in her garden with her eyes wide open in terror, as if she'd seen something horrible in her final moments. The Merrick twins followed a week later. Both brothers, pillars of Natchez society, died on the same night after attending a dinner party at the Washington plantation. The doctor called it food poisoning, but I know better. I know they died seeing the faces of every slave they'd ever tortured, every family they'd torn apart. Now as I stand in the kitchen of the Beaumont mansion preparing for another dinner party, I can feel the fear that permeates this house like smoke. Mrs. Beaumont has aged 10 years in the past month, her hair gone grey with worry, her hands shaking as she gives orders to the servants. Colonel Beaumont has taken to carrying a pistol everywhere, jumping at shadows and suspicious of everyone. "Eli?" Mrs. Beaumont calls from the doorway, her voice sharp with anxiety. "Come here, boy." I set down the silver I'm polishing and approach her, keeping my expression neutral. She studies my face with the intensity of someone looking for signs of treachery, but all she sees is the same quiet, obedient slave who's served her family for years. "The guests will be arriving soon," she says. "I want you to be extra careful tonight. Watch for anything unusual." Unusual. If only she knew how unusual things were about to become. "Yes, ma'am," I reply. "Should I be watching for anything particular?" She hesitates, then leans closer, lowering her voice. "There are rumors, Eli, terrible rumors about slaves poisoning their masters. I don't believe such nonsense, of course. Our slaves are loyal, well-treated, but one can never be too careful. Well-treated." The lie rolls off her tongue so easily she might actually believe it. But I remember the scars on my back, the sound of Sarah's screams, the sight of Mercy's torn dress. Well-treated. "I'll keep my eyes open, Ma'am, I promise." The guests begin arriving as the sun sets, their carriages pulling up to the front door in a procession of nervous wealth. But tonight's gathering is different from the grand celebrations of the past. There are fewer guests. Death has thinned their ranks considerably. Those who do attend move with the careful steps of people who know they're being hunted, even if they don't know by whom. I recognize every face as I serve the pre-dinner drinks. Judge Morrison's replacement, a nervous man named Hartwell who jumps every time a door creaks. The surviving Washington brothers, their eyes constantly scanning the room for threats. Mrs. Pemberton, whose husband died just last week under mysterious circumstances, clutching her pearl necklace like a talisman against evil. But it's the conversation that truly reveals their terror. "I'm telling you, it's not natural," Mr. Washington whispers to Colonel Beaumont as I refill their glasses. 7 families in 6 weeks, that's not coincidence. "What are you suggesting?" the colonel replies, but his voice lacks conviction. "I'm suggesting we're under attack, maybe not by Yankees or abolitionists, but by something closer to home." The implication hangs in the air like poison gas. They're starting to suspect their own slaves, the very people they depend on for their comfort and luxury. The paranoia is spreading faster than any disease. Dinner is a tense affair. The usual laughter and boasting are replaced by hushed conversations about security measures and suspicious behavior. Mrs. Beaumont has stationed armed overseers around the dining room, their presence a stark reminder of the fear that now governs these people's lives. I move between the guests like a specter, serving course after course while listening to their whispered fears. They speak of selling their slaves and hiring white servants, of moving north where they'll be safe, of arming themselves against the very people who cook their food and tend their children. It's during the main course that I make my move. The powder goes into Judge Hartwell's wine, just a pinch invisible among the dark liquid. He's been particularly vocal tonight about the need for harsh measures to control the slave population, suggesting public whippings and executions to send a message. His message will be received, but not in the way he expects. As the evening progresses, I watch him carefully. The powder works slowly, building in his system like a gathering storm. At first, there's just a slight flush to his cheeks, a tremor in his hands that he attributes to the wine. But as the night wears on, the symptoms intensify. "Are you feeling well, Judge?" Mrs. Beaumont asks as he pushes away his dessert plate. "Just tired," he replies, but sweat beads on his forehead despite the cool evening air. Perhaps I should take my leave, but he doesn't make it to his carriage. The convulsions start as he's saying his goodbyes in the front hall. One moment he's shaking hands with Colonel Beaumont. The next he's on the floor, his body writhing, as if invisible hands are tearing at his soul. His eyes roll back, showing only white, and from his throat comes a sound I'll never forget. A scream of pure terror that seems to go on forever. "Get Dr. Whitmore," someone shouts, but I know it's too late. The powder has done its work and Judge Hartwell is seeing things no living man should see. "They're here," he gasps, his voice barely human. "They're all here, Sarah, Marcus, little Jenny, oh God, they're all here." Sarah, he knows Sarah's name. Somehow in his dying moments, he's seeing the slaves he's condemned, the lives he's destroyed. Mama Brigitte was right. This powder doesn't just kill the body, it torments the soul. The other guests back away in horror, as Judge Hartwell claws at the air, fighting invisible attackers. His final words are a confession that chills everyone in the room. I'm sorry, please, I didn't know they were human." Then he's still, his eyes staring at nothing, his face frozen in an expression of absolute terror. The room erupts in chaos. Women scream, men shout orders, servants scatter like leaves in a hurricane. But through it all I remain calm, helping to move the body, comforting the hysterical guests, playing my role as the faithful slave. But inside I'm celebrating. Another name crossed off my list, another monster sent to face the judgment of his victims. As the guests flee into the night, their carriages racing away from the cursed Beaumont mansion, I help clean up the aftermath. Mrs. Beaumont sits in her parlor, staring at nothing, while Colonel Beaumont paces like a caged animal. "This has to stop," he mutters. "Whatever's happening, it has to stop." But it won't stop. Not until every last one of them pays for their crimes. Not until the screams of the enslaved are answered with the screams of their oppressors. Later that night, as I lie in my attic room, I can hear them talking in hushed, frightened voices. They're making plans to leave Natchez, to abandon their plantations and flee north. Some speak of selling their slaves immediately. Others of hiring armed guards. Let them run. Let them hide. Fear will follow them wherever they go, because I've planted seeds of terror that will grow in the darkness of their guilty consciences. My name is Eli, and tonight, the harvest of the damned continues. The spirits of the dead are finally getting their justice, one terrified scream at a time. The church bells of Natchez ring out across the morning mist, calling the faithful to Sunday service at St. Mary's Cathedral. But faith is a scarce commodity in this city of shadows, where death stalks the wealthy and paranoia poisons every conversation. Still, they come, the surviving aristocrats, the nervous merchants, the plantation owners who jump at their own shadows, seeking comfort in ritual and prayer. I walk behind the Beaumont family as we make our way up the cathedral steps, my head bowed in false piety, while my eyes scan the crowd. So many familiar faces, so many names still on my list. They cluster together like sheep sensing wolves, their expensive clothes unable to hide the fear that radiates from them like heat from a fever. Pastor Whitfield stands at the pulpit, his silver hair gleaming in the stained glass light. He's been the spiritual leader of Natchez's elite for 20 years, blessing their wealth while ignoring the source of it. His sermons speak of God's favor on the righteous, of divine providence blessing those who follow his will. Never once has he mentioned the sin of slavery, the evil of treating human beings like livestock, but today something is different. As I take my place in the servants section at the back of the church, I notice Pastor Whitfield's hands shaking as he opens his Bible. His usually commanding voice wavers as he begins the service, and his eyes dart nervously around the congregation. "Dearly beloved," he begins, "we gather today in the shadow of great tribulation. Our community has been tested, our faith challenged by events that defy understanding." The congregation murmurs agreement, their faces etched with worry and confusion. They want answers, explanations for the plague of death that has swept through their ranks. They want their pastor to make sense of the senseless. "Some among you have whispered of curses," Pastor Whitfield continues, his voice growing stronger. "Others speak of divine judgment, of God's wrath upon the wicked. But I say to you, we must not give in to superstition and fear." Superstition. If only he knew how real the supernatural forces at work truly are. The service proceeds with hymns and prayers, but I can feel the tension building like pressure before a storm. These people are desperate for comfort, for assurance that their world isn't crumbling around them. But comfort is the last thing they deserve. It's during the sermon that Pastor Whitfield's facade finally cracks. "The Lord works in mysterious ways," he declares, gripping the pulpit with white knuckles. "Sometimes he uses pestilence to test our faith. Sometimes he sends tribulation to purify our souls. But we must remember, we are his chosen people, blessed by his grace." Chosen people. Blessed by grace. The hypocrisy is staggering, even by their standards. But then something unexpected happens. From the back of the church, a voice rises in song, not one of their sanitized hymns, but a spiritual born in the slave quarters, raw with pain and hope. "Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. Tell old Pharaoh, let my people go." Every head turns to see who dares sing such words in this sacred space of white supremacy. It's Samuel, one of the Beaumont field hands, his voice strong and clear despite the danger he's courting. Other slaves join in, their voices blending in harmony that speaks of suffering and resistance. "When Israel was in Egypt land, let my people go. Oppressed so hard they could not stand, let my people go." The effect is electric. The white congregation sits in stunned silence, while their slaves, their property, sing of liberation and freedom. Some of the masters look angry, others confused, but all are clearly shaken by this unprecedented display of defiance. Pastor Whitfield pounds his gavel, trying to restore order. "Silence! This is a house of God, not a place for such displays." But the singing continues, growing stronger with each verse. I can see the effect of Mama Brigitte's herbs in the straightened spines, the lifted chins, the eyes that no longer look down in submission. My people are remembering who they are, remembering that they are human beings created in God's image, not beasts of burden. "Enough!" Colonel Beaumont roars, rising from his pew. "Samuel, you'll answer for this insolence." But Samuel doesn't cower. Instead, he looks the colonel directly in the eye and says, "Yes, sir, I reckon I will, but not to you." The words hang in the air like a challenge. For a moment, The entire church holds its breath, waiting to see what happens when a slave openly defies his master in front of the entire community. That's when Pastor Whitfield does something that surprises everyone, including me. Instead of supporting the colonel's authority, he raises his hand for silence and says, Perhaps we should listen to what they're trying to tell us." The congregation erupts in shocked murmurs. Mrs. Beaumont looks like she might faint, while other plantation owners glare at the pastor with undisguised fury. "Pastor Whitfield," Judge Hartwell's replacement sputters, "surely you're not suggesting that we allow slaves to dictate the conduct of our worship." "I'm suggesting," the pastor replies, his voice growing stronger, "that we examine our consciences. These deaths, these mysterious illnesses, what if they are indeed God's judgment? What if we've been blind to our own sins?" The church falls silent, except for the sound of rustling clothes and nervous breathing. Pastor Whitfield has just spoken the unspeakable, the possibility that their suffering might be deserved. "For too long," he continues, "we have justified the unjustifiable. We have called evil good and good evil. We have treated our fellow human beings as property, while claiming to follow the teachings of Christ. I can hardly believe what I'm hearing. Is Pastor Whitfield actually developing a conscience after 20 years of blessing slavery? But his moment of moral clarity is short-lived. As he speaks, I notice something strange happening to him. His face grows pale, his hands begin to tremble more violently, and sweat beads on his forehead despite the cool morning air. The powder. I remember now. I slipped it into the communion wine earlier this morning, knowing that Pastor Whitfield always takes the first sip to test for quality. The dose was small, meant to work slowly, but the stress of the moment seems to be accelerating its effects. "Pastor." "Mrs." Beaumont calls out, concern replacing her earlier shock. "Are you feeling well?" Pastor Whitfield grips the pulpit tighter, his knuckles white with strain. I'm fine. Just the weight of truth can be heavy sometimes." But he's not fine. As I watch, his eyes begin to take on the glassy look I've seen before, the look of someone beginning to see beyond the veil of the living world. "They're here," he whispers, his voice barely audible. "They're all here, watching us." "Who's here?" Colonel Beaumont demands, rising from his seat. Pastor Whitfield's eyes scan the empty air above the congregation, seeing things that only he can perceive. "The dead, the ones I blessed into bondage. They're standing right behind you, all of you." The congregation begins to shift nervously, some looking over their shoulders as if they might actually see the spirits Pastor Whitfield is describing. "Sarah," he continues, his voice growing stronger. "Sweet Sarah, barely 16 when they beat her to death. She's standing right there behind Master James's empty pew. And Marcus, sold away from his children, he's here too. And little Jenny, worked to death in the cotton fields before she saw her 10th birthday." The names hit the congregation like physical blows. These aren't abstract concepts or distant memories. These are specific people, specific crimes, specific sins that Pastor Whitfield has witnessed and blessed over the years. "Pastor, please," Mrs. Beaumont pleads. "You're frightening the children." "Good," he shouts, his voice echoing off the cathedral walls. "They should be frightened. We all should be frightened. Do you know what they're saying, these spirits? They're saying the judgment has already begun." That's when the convulsions start. Pastor Whitfield's body jerks violently, as if invisible hands are shaking him. He falls to his knees behind the pulpit, his face contorted in agony. "I can see them all," he gasps. "Every slave I blessed into bondage, every family I helped tear apart. They're showing me, oh God, they're showing me what we've done." The congregation erupts in panic. Some flee toward the exits. Others fall to their knees in prayer. Still others simply sit in stunned silence. But I remain calm, watching as another name is crossed off my list. Pastor Whitfield's final words are a confession that will haunt this community for generations. The boy, the slave boy. He's the instrument of God's wrath. He's the angel of death come to harvest the wicked. Then he collapses, his body still, his eyes staring at the cross above the altar. In the chaos that follows, no one notices me slip away from the church. But as I walk through the streets of Natchez, I can hear the bells tolling. Not for worship now, but for the dead. Pastor Whitfield's words echo in my mind. The angel of death, come to harvest the wicked. Perhaps that's what I am. Perhaps that's what I've always been, even before I knew it myself. My name is Eli, and today even God's house has acknowledged my purpose. The truth has been spoken under the altar, and there's no taking it back. The soldiers arrive on a Tuesday morning, their blue uniforms stark against the autumn mist rolling off the Mississippi. I watch from my attic window as they march up the main street of Natchez, their boots keeping perfect time on the cobblestones. 20 men, maybe 30, led by a captain whose face is hard as granite and twice as cold. Word spreads through the city like wildfire. The federal government has finally taken notice of the mysterious deaths plaguing our aristocracy. They've sent investigators, they say. Men trained to uncover the truth behind what the newspapers are calling the Natchez plague. But I know better. These aren't investigators, they're hunters, and I'm their prey. 3 months have passed since Pastor Whitfield's dramatic confession in the cathedral, and the death toll has continued to climb. 17 families have been touched by my justice, their patriarchs and matriarchs falling one by one to Mama Brigitte's deadly gifts. The survivors huddle in their mansions like rabbits in a warren, afraid to eat, afraid to drink, afraid to trust anyone, especially their slaves. The irony isn't lost on me. For the first time in their lives, these masters know what it feels like to live in fear, to wonder if each day might be their last. It's a taste of the terror they've inflicted on my people for generations, but their fear has made them dangerous. Last week, Colonel Beaumont ordered the public whipping of 3 house slaves claiming they'd been acting suspicious. The week before, Mrs. Washington had her entire kitchen staff sold downriver, replacing them with new slaves from Charleston who didn't know the local customs or connections. The paranoia is eating them alive from the inside, which is exactly what I intended. But now, the soldiers are here and everything is about to change. I slip down from the attic and make my way to the kitchen, where the other servants are gathered around the window, watching the military procession with wide eyes and hushed voices. "What you think they want?" whispers Mary, the cook who replaced poor Sarah all those years ago. "Same thing they always want," replies Samuel, his voice bitter with experience, "to protect white folks from us dangerous slaves. But I know it's more specific than that. These soldiers aren't here to maintain order, they're here to find me. Somehow, someone has connected the dots, traced the pattern of deaths back to their source. The question is, how much do they know? I get my answer that afternoon when Captain Morrison, no relation to the dead judge, arrives at the Beaumont mansion with a warrant to search the premises. He's a tall man with steel-gray eyes and the bearing of someone accustomed to command. But there's something else in his expression, something that looks almost like respect. "Colonel Beaumont," he says, as Mrs. Beaumont serves tea in the parlor. "I'll be direct. We have reason to believe that the deaths in your community are not natural occurrences." Colonel Beaumont's hand shakes as he sets down his teacup. "What are you suggesting, Captain?" "I'm suggesting that someone has been systematically poisoning the leadership of Natchez. Someone with access to your homes, your food, your trust. The implication hangs in the air like smoke." Mrs. Beaumont's face goes white, while the Colonel's jaw tightens with barely controlled rage. "So you think it's one of our slaves?" Mrs. Beaumont whispers. "I think it's one slave in particular," Captain Morrison replies. "A house servant, probably young, definitely intelligent. Someone who's been watching, learning, planning for years." My blood turns to ice. They know. Somehow, impossibly, they know. "That's preposterous," Colonel Beaumont blusters. "Our slaves are loyal, well-treated." "They would never—" "Colonel," Captain Morrison interrupts, "in the past 6 months, 56 members of Natchez's elite have died under mysterious circumstances. The only common factor is that they all employed house slaves. More specifically, they all had contact with slaves who had access to their food and drink. 56. I hadn't been keeping count, but hearing the number spoken aloud sends a thrill of dark pride through my chest. 56 monsters sent to face the judgment of their victims. "What do you intend to do?" Mrs. Beaumont asks, her voice barely a whisper. "We're going to question every house slave in the city," Captain Morrison replies. "Starting with this household, the interrogations begin immediately." One by one, the servants are called into the study, where Captain Morrison and his men ask pointed questions about their duties, their access to food preparation, their observations of unusual behavior among their fellow slaves. I'm called in last. which tells me they've saved the best for last. As I enter the study, I can feel their eyes on me, studying my face, my posture, my reactions. But I've been preparing for this moment my entire life. I know how to be invisible, how to be overlooked, how to be exactly what they expect a slave to be. "Eli, isn't it?" Captain Morrison says, consulting a notebook. "Yes, sir," I reply, keeping my eyes downcast. "You've been with the Beaumont family for 10 years?" "Yes, sir, since I was small." "And your duties include serving meals, cleaning, general household work?" "Yes, sir." He studies me for a long moment, and I can feel him trying to see past my carefully constructed facade. But all he sees is a quiet, obedient slave boy, exactly what I want him to see. "Have you noticed anything unusual lately, Eli? Any strange behavior among the other servants? Anyone acting differently?" This is my chance. I could deflect suspicion onto someone else, sacrifice another slave to save myself. It would be easy, expected even, but I won't. I've killed monsters, not innocents. "No, sir," I say simply. "Everyone's been scared, what with all the dying and such, but nothing unusual." Captain Morrison makes a note in his book. "What about access to the kitchen? Do you help with food preparation?" "Sometimes, sir. When cook needs help carrying things or cleaning up." "And you've served at dinner parties, had access to the wine, the food?" My heart pounds, but I keep my voice steady. "Yes, sir, that's part of my duties." He leans forward, his grey eyes boring into mine. "Eli, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer. Do you know anything about the deaths that have been occurring in this city? The moment stretches between us like a taut wire. This is it, the moment of truth." I could confess, could tell him everything about Mama Brigitte and the poison and the justice I've been serving. Part of me wants to see the shock and fear in his eyes when he realizes that a 13-year-old slave boy has brought an entire city to its knees, but I don't. Instead, I do what I've always done. I survive. "No, sir," I lie. "I don't know nothing about that." Captain Morrison stares at me for another long moment, then closes his notebook. "You can go, Eli, but don't leave the property. We may have more questions." As I leave the study, I can hear him talking to Colonel Beaumont in low, urgent tones. They suspect, but they can't prove anything. Not yet. That night, as the household sleeps, I make my decision. It's time to disappear. I slip out through the kitchen door one last time, carrying nothing but the clothes on my back and the remaining powder from Mama Brigitte. The city is quiet, patrolled by soldiers who think they're hunting a monster. They're not wrong, but they'll never catch me. I make my way through the familiar streets one last time, past the houses where I've served justice, past the church where Pastor Whitfield spoke his final truth, past the slave market where so many of my people have been bought and sold like cattle. At the edge of town where the road disappears into the cypress swamps, I pause and look back at Natchez one final time. Smoke rises from a dozen chimneys, carrying the prayers and fears of the survivors. They'll rebuild, of course. They'll bring in new slaves, new victims, new sources of wealth built on human misery. But they'll never feel safe again. Every meal will be suspect, every servant a potential threat, every shadow a reminder that justice can come from the most unexpected places. I turn and walk into the swamp, following paths known only to runaway slaves and root women. Behind me, Natchez sleeps fitfully, haunted by the legend of a boy who brought death to their doorsteps. Some say I died in the swamp, consumed by alligators or quicksand. Others claim I made it north, that I'm living free in some distant city. A few whisper that I'm still out there, still watching, still waiting for the right moment to return. They're all wrong and they're all right. My name is Eli and I am become legend. In the slave quarters of a dozen cities, mothers tell their children stories of the boy who fought back, who made the masters pay for their cruelty. In the nightmares of plantation owners across the South, I am the shadow at the dinner table, the poison in the wine, the reminder that evil always finds its reckoning. The war that Mama Brigitte predicted is coming. I can feel it in the wind, see it in the growing tensions between North and South. When it arrives, when brother fights brother, and the whole South burns like a funeral pyre, they'll remember my name. They'll remember that it all started with a 13-year-old slave boy who refused to accept that justice was only for white folks. 56 aristocrats fell to my hand, but my real victory was something else entirely. I showed my people that we don't have to accept our chains, that we can fight back, that we are more than property. I am Eli, the boy who brought justice to Natchez. I am the whisper in the wind, the shadow in the corner, the reminder that evil always pays its debts. And somewhere in the cypress swamps, where the spirits of the dead dance in the moonlight, I'm still watching, still waiting, still ready to serve justice to those who think themselves above it. The legend of Eli has only just begun.